Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Shield of Hope channel. This is the actual Donnie Shields unedited podcast. Yes, it's a different one than the Hope Speaks podcast. That's because we have a returning guest today. His name is Chase Morgan Hulett. And let me just say, Chase, you've been on this podcast now about 3-4 times. Are you excited to come back for another run?
It's always good to talk to the Donnie Shields. It really is. I enjoy being a nerd over film and talking about what's coming out or what I've seen and just geeking out on anything that we have in common when it comes to film. Like Star Wars, that's a perfect example for you and me, because I know we're both nerds and we'll dive right deep into it. But we won't be the annoying fans that, push away everything and are, those irritating fans that they're too much of a fan,
You
that
mean the Harry
over-explain
Potter
everything.
fans?
The
Oh, I'm
Harry
sorry. Did
Potter
I just say
fan.
that? You know what, though?
So
Dedication, I think we talked about this before. Dedication on the end of these Harry Potter fans. Universal Studios in Florida, it's soaking, drenching hot outside no matter what, humidity, and they're still wearing their wizardry gear. So, props to them. They go hardcore. I can never do that.
no, I grew up with Harry Potter. I saw them in theaters when I was a little kid. We saw the first one and I was in love with the owls. And I remember seeing them in theaters and they were always in my life. But it's one of those franchises that if I didn't see another Harry Potter movie ever again, it wouldn't bother me. But when I watch them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I enjoy this. Like, it's kind of my childhood in a way. Like, it's just something in my childhood that I enjoy. It's like those old Cartoon Network shows. Like, if I didn't see Johnny Bravo ever again, I'll be like, oh well. But if you watch it, you're like, oh my gosh, I remember this when I was a kid. So that's where Harry Potter is for me.
Reverse effect, because I was just talking about this with my buddy the other day. I was like, there's certain films and like series I'm just content with never seeing again. It was magical then, and if you go back and rewatch it, it's probably not as magical. That'd be Power Rangers for me. Okay, like the idea of Power Rangers, and I saw the 2017 film Power Rangers. God awful, by the way, god awful. I wish I never would have saw it, but you know what? I thought for a chance it was gonna be good, and boy, did I walk out of the theater like, yeah, this was very not good. And I'm sure if you pull up IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, it is not going to give it a favorable rating. But my thing was Dino Thunder. Oh boy, I see the reaction. What's happening?
I'm looking up the rating. I got a 5.9 out of 10 on IMDb.
Wow, that's too high. That is too high. Like it should be down there towards the Fantastic Four levels, like the 8% on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever. But this film, okay, like I thought for a minute, Chase, okay, when they were making this Power Rangers film, I thought it would be like I knew they would keep it like family friendly, like a little bit less than Transformers, but I never thought that they would include the TV show antics of the yeah when they threw the punches, and they did, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like how do you make a
It
serious film
is
and then include that?
cringy.
So like I don't want to go back and watch Dino Thunder. Dino Thunder to me was the best, along with Ninja Storm and SPD Emergency. Don't know if you've seen any of those, but to go back and rewatch it right now, I feel it would ruin that magic. So I'm just going to stay in my bubble and be like, it was great as a kid.
Yeah, and um, Power Rangers was the one show that we never watched. When it came on, we were watching. We were either watching something else that caught our eye, or we were outside. Because I grew up in the country and we only had a certain amount of time to watch TV. So it was usually in the morning, and I think Power Rangers came on later in the day. I might be wrong, but I don't remember it as much. I like the red one because my favorite color is red. So I obviously um that was the one I always went to. But I went to Comic-Con last year here in Kansas City, and the original black Power Ranger was there, and I got to see him from a distance. But that was pretty cool. So
Very nice.
a
No,
little childhood.
so I have been waiting to talk to somebody. Jake was supposed to come on to talk about this, and I haven't talked about this with anybody, like as far as like, on a podcast, of course, off the script, yes. But Avatar 2 has crossed $2 billion. And I know Chase saw it, and I'm
Oh yeah.
gonna brag because you know what? Everybody that has been waiting since 2009 for Avatar 2 to come out. I always sat back in the quiet space of the internet. I was like, you know what? I have faith in this film. I have faith in James Cameron. I know it's going to be successful. Everybody was crapping on it. You're like, oh, this film's never coming out. Nobody wants to see this. It's a one-time thing only. I'm just going to sit back and be like, yo, I told you. I was right. It has a good feeling to be right. But with that all
It,
being
it
said, I just want to pass it over to you, Chase, and get your Avatar 2 reaction because I haven't talked to you about Avatar 2 yet.
well, when I watched it was the best experience I had at a theater. It's not now, and I'll tell you why later because I don't want to get off topic. Um, so remind me. But it was a great experience for me. Like I haven't seen the first Avatar probably since 2009. And I saw it in theaters, thought it was amazing, and then I saw it at home and I was like, it's Pocahontas. So for me, the Avatar movies, it's more I have to focus on the world building and the visual effects more than the story because the story I feel is regenerated from just past films and all that. So to me, it doesn't have a strong story, but it is literally the perfect film or the perfect example of why we go to the movies. It's stunning. I mean, that whale scene, anything with a whale in Avatar 2 is my favorite. That's my favorite scenes. Like if the whale wasn't in it, I wouldn't have given it as high of a rating. But um I think the only I do understand people who don't like or who are upset that it take what 10 years for it to come out or the sequel. It took I don't know how long it took exactly. But I not seeing it for that long, I didn't really need to see the first one. It seemed like it was its own separate film. It didn't seem like you had to watch it, you know? It wasn't something like, "Oh my gosh, I have to watch the first one before you watch this one." Like I feel like you could never see Avatar. Like you didn't have to see the first one and then you see this one and the only thing in my head that you need to know is, oh, the bad guy was from the first one. Okay, that makes sense. He came back as an avatar. Cool. Let's move on. Now I'm curious on what they're going to do in the future, and to me, it's gonna be one of those franchises that it's gonna be all about the visual effects and how this next one's gonna wow you even more. Because I read an article that they were bringing fire into it, and I was like, oh, that's cool. It's gonna be every element on Earth. It's gonna be popping out. But it is nominated for 4 Oscars, Academy Awards, excuse me, for sound, visual effects, best picture, and best achievement in production design. So it's gonna win at least 3 of those. So
So it is actually you nailed it when you said it is why we go to the movies. Um, I will say the top two this year, and of course I put Bullet Train at number 3. I love Bullet Train. Bullet Train was an amazing film.
yeah, it was.
I don't know if you agree with where the placement is this year, but number 3 for me was Bullet Train. Number 2, of course, was Avatar. Number 1 was Top Gun. But Top Gun and Avatar had the same reason, and I would say Bullet Train, but more so the top 2 of why we go to the movies. And again, Avatar 2, you also mentioned you didn't need to see the first one or you didn't feel like you needed to see the first one. I went into Top Gun Maverick never watching the first Top Gun. And you didn't need to see the first Top Gun to realize what was going on in the second one. And I think that is something that's kind of lost in Hollywood right now, especially with so many sequels. Because so many sequels, like especially Marvel films, you kind of get lost in this mix of like, what's going on? Well, wait, you didn't watch the Disney Plus series? Like, no, I didn't want it. Okay, it's the first time I picked up a film since like 2011 or whatever for Marvel. Like, no, I don't know all this character building and like world building, and I don't know why this is funny. So I think like you nailed 2 different things there. The one thing I want to say though, and I've been preaching about this specifically that I want to see in Avatar 2 this whole time. I love the idea of Awa, and I know that like you and me are very spiritual and religious, but I like to
Mm-hmm.
see that mythology in my films. Star Wars has elements of mythology. And that is why I appreciated this franchise and this film. And I was kind of glad that James Cameron still went with that mythology. Now, don't get me wrong, the daughter is going to be like the Jesus baby. I don't know why she's there, but boy, are those cool visuals when she's like controlling all the undersea creatures, and like that's just some fun stuff right there. But like connecting with nature, connecting with yourself, and the family element, I was very shocked. And this is something where James Cameron surprises me, because he'll go on social media and say something like, we need to abolish the father like figure in the families and stuff like that, but yet he makes this beautiful fathers protect their families type vibe. And so did Natiri, the mother. She protected, and boy, she looked savage in that final battle scene. Like she looked feral. She was ready to kill, by the way. Like you just saw it in the eyes. Great acting, by the way. Terrific acting. But it's just like, it had all those elements that I was ready to see in a film that I think Hollywood has kind of gone away from, that Top Gun and Avatar 2 brought back. Now, I will say this because I want to clear the air on the internet, because I've not heard this. I feel like I'm the only one talking about this theory, but we all know that Avatar 2 and 3 were shot together, right? Like that's not news.
Yeah.
So James Cameron said that, of course, like we didn't know how much this movie needed to make back all that production budget since 2010, basically. So he shot 2 and 3 together. Now, he said that he edited a lot of footage out of this one, but Avatar 3's hour long range. He said that let me back this up real quick. He said in order to make 4 and 5, he needed 2 to succeed, which 2 has succeeded. But it's fascinating though, and I think he got away with a heist beyond belief, because he said the next film, Avatar 3, yes, you're including water or including fire elements and stuff like that, and like he already has laid out the plot of what they filmed, but he said the cut's 9 hours long. Now, we know that this was a 3-hour long film. Okay, hold on, Chase, I don't know if you know where I'm going with this. This one's a 3-hour long film. Did that man just film 3, 4, and 5 as well? 9 hours divided by 3 is 3 films. Did he just get away with a heist?
He filmed the I'm not sure. I know he filmed, because I was reading something, that he filmed the kids scenes for Avatar 4. Now, I did read about that, and he's like, I need to do that because they're going to get too old by the time we get there. And I was like, that makes sense. That's planning. So, but I don't know. You know, you hear, you read all the time about like uncut footage of films and it being 9 hours long, or I mean, they have an uncut. I don't remember the movie though. I wish I did. It was like a 2-hour movie, but it was like 5 hours of footage, and they cut it down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're curious on what did they get rid of, you know? And that's why I like when films do extended editions, and they and maybe when these come out, he'll come out with an extended edition, like the really diehard fans, like, hey, here's Avatar 2 and 3. They're 4, almost 5 hours. If you are, there's going to be dedicated fans that will watch that immediately. I would be one of them to watch it, because I would want to know what he took out. So I don't know. I mean, you might be right, you might be wrong, but either way, we're going to get them, because Avatar 2 succeeded. So we're gonna get what we want, really, at the end of the day, which is good.
But like, what's weird, like, okay, like I agree with you, and I completely understand where you're going. And I think that Netflix film that was it Scorsese did or whatever, a while ago, was like a 5-hour, 6-hour cut that they cut down to like 3 hours, 3.5. I forget.
The Irishman.
The Irishman, yeah. I love how we both thought of that at the same time. Thank you very much. But I understand where you're going with that. But then I thought the same thing. And then one of the producers followed it up from James Cameron separate. They interviewed one of the producers of the film as well. And he's like, yeah, well, you know, we already have some elements of 4 already shot. And I'm over here like, interesting. Like, it could be the kids' scenes. But I was like, that's interesting. Now, James Cameron also talked about, he also promised a lot of things all the way up through 5. And I think this will be a fascinating transition. We've never seen a sci-fi film go this route per se. And I think this is fascinating. With James Cameron, he promised other worlds other than Pandora coming up, which is just like, okay, how did the Avatar get off Pandora? That'll be fascinating, unless it goes back to the humans and stuff. or they just equip their technology, steal it, and like head back towards Earth and go in the chambers. But he also promised a return to Earth from the Na'vi, and it would be fascinating to see the dilemma coming up of Jake in the Avatar body portraying his race, because regardless of we see him as a main character and we like, okay, we can understand why, he did betray the human race, quote unquote. But it's a whole different level to see him go back to Earth and watch the Na'vi start killing humans and seeing what his reaction would be. Because at the end of the day, they're aliens to us. And I think that's that brings a whole different perspective, I think, to a film that we haven't seen through a sci-fi franchise.
Yeah.
You are basically the alien that you created.
Yeah. Well, your actions have consequences. You're pretty much. That'd be cool to see it kind of loop around back then. I don't know. Maybe Avatar 5 would be that. I just hope that he has an end. I hope that's my only worry is because he's really building it huge, as we're seeing with 4 or 5, like 5 films already going to be out. 3 of them not even, out in public yet. I just hope that after 5, it's done. I hope it doesn't become a series or it doesn't become all these spin-offs. I just hope that, because I think that's the problem is with, media and film nowadays is that they always have to continue it. Like they're talking about bringing Iron Man back for Marvel. I might be wrong, but I read that and I was like, leave him alone. Like he died. That was a happy ending for Iron Man. Let him rest. Same with Captain America. Like it was like the most beautiful scene out of Marvel, the MCU, is him dancing with I'm bad with names, his lady. Yeah. But leave him alone. So I just hope Avatar that doesn't happen,
No, I get that. And I think, James Cameron, there's a lot of old school filmmakers. I get it. James Cameron and the Terminator series has gone on too long. Like that's one of the series where I'm like, okay, dude, like, you should came to an end eventually, but studios do what studios do, and that's how that works. But I still consider him in the old school class of like the Steven Spielbergs and the George Lucases. Whenever they have a vision in mind, they typically do end it. Some sooner rather than later, and some later rather than sooner. But they do typically end it, unless they sell their franchises like George Lucas did to Disney and stuff like that. Then Star Wars continues to go down this rabbit hole of terrible films. But that's just my personal opinion. Not trying to bring that in, but the only beautiful film that Disney made from Star Wars is Rogue One. But we'll forgive that.
Rogue One, right?
But it's just, I do feel like he does have an end. Now, am I going to be upset if they make comic books out of it? No, I'm not going to be upset. Like, anything like physical media, I'm not going to care. TV shows and stuff, though. My problem is, I don't think you could do a TV show for Avatar like they do with Lord of the Rings, because as big as Lord of the Rings budget is, boy, the Avatar budget would just be insane.
Yeah.
Like I can't see that being a TV show, because I can't picture that they're going to spend that much more than Lord of the Rings to fail just as hard as Lord of the Rings failed.
The Rings of Power or something like that.
That's why by the way, I'm not saying the Lord of the Rings franchise, to clarify everybody. It's the Rings of Power that Amazon did. My bad. I'm not just figure I might as well add that to context, so that if somebody like, well, Lord of the Rings failed, says Don and Shield, it's like, okay, well, yeah.
I mean that film that won 11 Oscars?
The film that's like 9 hours long when you watch it with commercials on TBS, yes.
It's pretty great. It's actually great. Actually,
with commercials, no, it's not great.
The reason Avatar 2 is not the greatest, theater experience I've had is because I recently saw all 3 Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy, in theaters, extended edition, all in a row. I saw that last weekend. It was 14 hours long. I sat in that theater for that.
How do you get
these? Amazing.
How do you get these releases out there that we can't get here? That's what I want to
know. It was this small theater called Screenland Armor. It's in Kansas City, and they had this event of showing the extended editions of Lord of the Rings. And I've seen one of them at theaters, but I didn't see the other 2. And my girlfriend, who came with me, she'd never seen them in theaters because she was too young. And then we brought 2 friends, who's never seen Lord of the Rings at all. So they got to see it on the big screen. But let me tell you, seeing them in order like that on the big screen and the battle scenes and the sound, oh my gosh, it was amazing. People were cheering. I mean, you had diehard fans in that. They were cheering. People would whistle when Aragorn came on. Like, it was funny. It was fun. But that was my best theater experience. I'll never do it again, ever, unless someone really begs me, like a friend or my sister, or even if I have a child and it happens, then I'll go with them. But I will not willingly by myself go do that again. It was 14 hours in the theater. It was
So
a long
considering you
time.
won't do that again for Lord of the Rings, let me just ask you then off the top of your head to see if you can give me a franchise that you would. If there was another franchise that re-released like so many movies in a row that you had to sit in a theater for like an extended period of time, what other ones would you go see?
Does it have to be like like movies with sequels and like a continuing story, or can it be like one long movie?
Well, if you're referencing Gone with the Wind, I'm going to be very upset with you, but I'm assuming that's where you're going. Um,
I, I would see Gone with the Wind in theaters in a minute, but I think the one I'd want to see is The Godfather. I would watch all three Godfathers in
I mean,
theaters.
that's still the
And
same story, isn't it?
yeah, I
Okay.
mean, the third one is Michael being old, which the third one's not that great. But the first two, I would see the first two in theaters in a row like that
Yeah,
because
but
they're
to
great
to
fun.
me, it's not like you're like to me the way you phrase that question was more like, does it have to be like three in a row, or like does it have to be like a time period? Like, can I choose Avatar 2? Can I go see like Top Gun and mixed it with like Mary Poppins or something? Like I'm just like, no, you can't do that. They still have to be like the same franchise of films.
Yeah, the same film. Yeah. No, I was curious if it was like I would see all of the original Star Wars in theaters in a row. Like I would do that right now. Like I'd miss work tomorrow for that.
All of the originals. I'm glad you clarified on that, by the way. Not all of them.
The originals. Yeah, yeah. No, not all of them. But I have been rewatching the prequels and I have been enjoying them very much.
The prequels are underrated. Now, here's the thing too. Like, I don't want to fall in this generational gap. Um, I don't want to say that, hey, the prequels are better because that's what we grew up with. Because in all retrospect, and I know that I have friends that watch the prequels before they watch the originals because that's the order that they came out and stuff like that. By the time it was like 2005, what would I have been like in fourth grade or whatever? So like I saw the last like Revenge of the Sith in theaters with my dad. That was the only Star Wars film I saw in theaters. Up until that, it was just like you just had to watch them on DVD. But my dad's friend specifically made me watch 4, 5, and 6, which is the original trilogy, A New Hope New Hope Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. I had to watch those before he even let me watch 1 and 2. So he actually made me watch them in the correct order, which I'm happy because I actually enjoy the original trilogy more than the prequels. And I think with just not trying to be biased or blind eye, I think that's the proper way to say, hey, those are the better series. The original trilogy will forever be the better one. Now,
Exactly.
the question is the bias kicks in, which it's not even biased to me, but people would say it. Kids that are growing up think the Disney franchise is good and at least better than the prequels. I strongly disagree, and I don't think that's a bias thing. Like, I think that's actually storytelling. Chase, am I being biased, or like what's pros and cons, or am I off?
I well, I'm with you. But we grew up with a certain films of Star Wars. And then now these younger kids are growing up with this film. It's like when I talked to my mom about the new Mary Poppins, the Emily Blunt, and my mom's like,
I'm
she's
Mary
great, but she's
Poppins,
not.
y'all. Sorry,
Yeah.
I had to do that.
She's like, but she's like, it's not the one I grew up with. Or, these remakes. She's like, it's great, but it's not the one I grew up with. It's going to be the same for us. Like, yeah, the effects are great and for the Disney films, and there are scenes in it that I really enjoy. And even The Last Jedi, the one that's really hated, I can enjoy it because I saw the set when I was in Ireland, so that's kind of a soft spot. Yeah, I know. But I have a different ways of viewing films. Like if it's a film I know it's not going to be that great, I try to put it in the entertaining category. So I don't look too deep into story or how the shots are. That's every Michael Bay film is in the entertaining category. So any film that just isn't deep, I'll call it, is going to be there. And then you have the good stories, good writing, good film aspects, and then and that's how I kind of watch films. So, but nothing's my favorite is Revenge of the Sith. That is the Star Wars film that every time I watch it, it's so emotional. It's such a rough film. And I just realized, I realized when I was studying Shakespeare that it's pretty much Macbeth. Like that's what that film is. And it's a heartbreaking story. Like that's a rough film to get through. You get through 1 and 2 and you're like, okay, this is all right, whatever. But then you watch that one and you see what happens and then you're like, oh my goodness. And then you watch the original trilogy and it's so crazy. And I listened to an interview with George Lucas that blew my mind. And he said that Qui-Gon was right. And I always thought Qui-Gon was wrong, that he wasn't the chosen one. I always said that. And I feel like a lot of people do. But George Lucas said Qui-Gon was right. Anakin has always been the chosen one. It just took him a long time to fulfill his destiny. Because at the end, he killed the Emperor. There was still good left in him, just like Luke said, and Padme said the same thing. So the whole story came to a close, and he did what he was supposed to do. He was the chosen one. He brought balance to the Force, and I thought that blew my mind when he was saying that. And I was like, well, it's the creator saying it, so I'm not going to argue. Like I thought that was crazy. So anyway, we're on our Star Wars thing already.
Well, hey, there's nothing wrong with the Star Wars thing. The Star Wars thing is good to talk about. Although I'm sure a lot of people on the channel heard me and Jake and Hummel and you talk about Star Wars enough. So we're gonna switch over to another topic. And I don't know if you're much of a sports fan. I know we talked sports off and on sporadically, but there's the Chiefs Super Bowl bound. I'm sure
yeah.
I'm sure you're gonna have fun out there if they win.
It's gonna be a party here. I know that.
But I want to say the great Tom Brady has retired, the GOAT, the legend. It's weird, and I posted this on Instagram, I posted it on Facebook. Really, I posted it on Facebook and then screenshot it and shared it on all my accounts is what I end up doing. But it's so weird because growing up, I'm not saying that you hate somebody that has success. I think that is a lot of people's cases, especially like we talked about Avatar 2 and stuff like that. I think you hate success, or like some people hate success. I think I fell in that category as a kid because Tom Brady terrorized. And when I say terrorized how many NFL teams over his career. Was always winning, and it always seems like whether it was the fumble that wasn't called against the Raiders, the tuck rule, it just everything went the Patriots' way for that dynasty. It felt like Tom Brady either A, cheated, or he was just lucky, or God given, or whatever he was. But the more he matured, and the more that I matured and grew up, you have to respect the drive, the energy, the hustle, everything that he put into it 24/7 to get to how many years he played in the NFL. I forget, but he's like 45, 46. He played so long. That was basically my entire lifespan. It's truly incredible to sit back and watch somebody that's as good and talented as they are. But what I'm going to ask you is not about sports, but it's about leaving a legacy. Because after doing that at the top of your game for so long, there's filmmakers that leave a legacy, whether it's, again, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, obviously they're not dead yet. I'm not talking about that kind of legacy, but the legacy in which they have taken their craft from film school, from wherever they started to now. And it could be visual effect wise, it could be story wise, it could be whatever. Chase, this is going to be a heavier question, and I know you're not prepped for this, but who or what / which filmmaker do you think left the biggest legacy in filmmaking? And number 2 is, what legacy do you want to leave behind in your filmmaker career?
Jeez, God, we just got done talking about Star Wars, and then, okay. Well, that's a tough one. That's really tough. You either have to focus on director himself or his craft. And I think you kind of need to focus on his craft a little bit more. Like which director had the most memorable films, or which film was so memorable, and I I would say that one of my top answers would have to be Francis Ford Coppola and The Godfather. I mean, the amount of problems that he went through to make that film. There's a great show on Paramount Plus called The Offer, and it's all about that. He went through hell. Like, he had the mob after him, and you name it. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it, but he had a hard time. And that film is considered a perfect film. It's like one of the films out there that is just perfect. Story wise, filming wise, anything that has to do with that film when you watch it. And then when you read the book, it's this exact same thing. Like, even the action lines in the novel are the same in the movie. Like, it's a perfect film. So I would say that a very would have to be up there for sure. But you have I'll bring Gone with the Wind in this, but you have Victor Fleming, who made in the same year or directed two of the most popular films of all time, Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz. Like, those are two great films to have on your directing resume. I mean, really good films. So, does that answer your question a little bit
Yeah, I
about?
mean, it's a hard answer, and there's no correct answer to. Like, that's the thing. There is no correct answer in this. I mean, you could talk about the first person that probably even directed, which I can't remember. I didn't even know who the first person that ever directed a film was. As far as like motion picture related. But I mean, you could put in you could put in Hitchcock, you could throw out a whole bunch of different combinations. Um, I don't know. Like, to me, Steven Spielberg, even though he wasn't the technical side of things, like you look at like George Lucas and James Cameron and even like J.J. Abrams and Michael Bay for the explosions, the effects, and taking ILM and keep bumping it up with George Lucas, how he did. I think Steven Spielberg, because I'm also very fascinated, just like you are, in the historical aspect. Not saying that they
Yeah,
didn't make history films before Spielberg, but I think Spielberg, and again, this can be completely wrong, and I'm going to hear about it in the comment section or whatever. But in my opinion, Steven Spielberg made it possible for more of these biography slash documentary type films that we're seeing now.
yeah.
Like, I don't,
That's
you see, like, there's a point to that. I know I could be super wrong, and everybody's going to be like, no, you're wrong. But to me, it just feels like the history, like the reason why we have a Christopher Nolan right now is because we had a Steven Spielberg. The reason why we have all these different like little stories, whether it's a Whitney Houston, whether it's the Queen, whether it's whatever Elvis story, I think is because of Steven Spielberg's storyline of taking real stuff, real wars, real situations, real people, and going down that road. So that's more of a storyline than it is the actual look of the films. Of course, he did a lot of good things with looks of films too. Like, those war scenes were spot on. Like, for
Oh
like whether
yeah.
it was like Saving Private Ryan or whatever, they're spot on films.
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
it's funny you bring those up. You have Nolan and Spielberg, and then Spielberg and Lucas. So George Lucas was definitely an inspiration for Spielberg, I would say. And then a good friend of George Lucas was actually Francis Ford Coppola. So you can see that path, and that's really cool to see.
no, and I mean, so answer or question number two out of that one would be, what legacy would you want to leave behind?
What legacy would I want to leave behind? I hmm. I mean, I think every filmmaker wants their own style, their own, like, you could watch a film, be like, oh, that's a Donnie Shield film, or something like that. But in my eyes, and I'll get a little religious here for a second, I just want to make films that touch people's hearts and make God proud. If I don't leave a legacy, then that wasn't my calling. If I make a bunch of films and it only touches a handful of people, then that was my calling. I mean, that's just me being honest. I don't need to be a huge Spielberg. If I get to the pearly gates and the father is proud that I did what he wanted me to do, that's all that matters. So whether I make Schindler's List or my film A Soldier's Blessing, if I feel that I've done what God wanted me to do in film, it doesn't matter. What matters is that I did what he wanted me to do. And that's it.
I think that's the best answer that anybody could give. So to give a counter answer to that, I would, well, I'm going to say this for people out there, because I had a conversation a while ago. It's probably been about 2 years now on a podcast. And I talked about main character syndrome. And I asked the two guests I had on, I was like, do you believe that you're a main character in life, or do you think you're a side character? And it's not disrespectful, because not everybody's made to be that main character. That's really like 1%. I mean, you look at the Bible in general, there was a lot of side characters in the Bible to create like the main character, which was Jesus. Like there's a lot of moving parts in the Bible, and some accepted the role as side character. Some never wanted to be side character. Some wanted to be the main character. And those ones that, ironically enough, and this is also a trait of humanity / our kind of personalities clashing, would be the people that don't want to be the side characters, that want to be the main characters, typically end up being the villains in the story to the most extent, because they're not happy. Like that psychologically, I find that to be more accurate. You know, there's people driven to be main characters, and there's people destined to be main characters. But typically, the people that aren't destined to be main characters, that want to be main characters, become the villains. But with all that being said, I want to say for anybody out there listening, it's kind of like the excuse me, the Einstein effect. If you talk to scientists, Einstein gets the credit for everything, but there had to be people under him that he was able to step on the foundation in order to find this. So regardless, if you, at the end of your life, whether you feel like, you know, you just were a simple man, raised a family, whatever, you didn't have a quote unquote legacy. Well, you really did, because you don't know what, you know, you could be the grandparent to like a JP Morgan, or you could be a grandparent to the next president of the United States, or so-and-so. Like you still have a foundation that you set. So I don't want anybody leaving thinking that like, oh, well, you know, I'm not going to leave a legacy. Everybody leaves a legacy, good or bad. Everybody leaves a legacy.
True.
To my, I guess the legacy I would leave, and I don't want to put you on the spot without giving an answer myself, even though it's a tough answer. And I'm probably going to just try to avoid giving an answer to really like the first question. Like, and I guess I really did answer it about the Hitchcock and stuff like that, but that's one of the questions I'd rather throw you on the spot with and not have to answer myself. But
that's nice.
as far as answering what legacy I'd leave behind, you know, and to backtrack a little bit, I think you might be more aware of this than most people. Like you and me, I think we're pretty well aware and like can like see the world in a different view. And like, even though we're both around the same age in our 20s, a lot of 20-year-olds aren't having this conversation about legacy. They're out there living life. They're doing whatever they want to do. So the legacy to me would be, just as long as I build up the company, the brand that I wanted to, whether success or failure, I think that's just being independent and being on your own. And saying that, hey, I did this, I created something. Yeah, it didn't work, but I gave it 100%. And I think that's a good enough thing to ask. And like I said, then we could go down the religious route, because I know you and me are both religious. You know, as long as you get to the pearly gates and God's like, well done, my good and faithful servant, that's all you want to hear. But at the end of the day, you know, legacy, like I said, everybody creates a legacy, whether you know it or not. My legacy would be, hey, just doing what I can, you know, giving it all.
I'm with you on that as well. I am. I am. I'd love to have my own, be like, hey, that's a chase film. It has Satan in it. It must be a chase film. Christians in it. It must be a chase film.
What is it? Isn't it Simon Pegg that always tags along with J.J. Abrams? Isn't that how you know it's a J.J. Abrams film? It's like Simon Pegg's in everything he does.
Yeah, pretty much. Or James Gunn and his brother Sean. Like anytime you're like, he's gonna be in it somewhere. So
speaking of which, and to switch topics, James Gunn has taken over DC. What do you think of that?
Yes.
Just I gotta And when I say taken over, he's cleaned everybody out and has taken over basically. So, what's your thoughts on the whole James
I
Gunn situation?
I think that James Gunn has proven himself. You know, he did the Suicide Squad, which was pretty great. Even the Peacemaker show wasn't that bad. Um, and Guardians of the Galaxy, obviously, he really did a good job on those. So I think he proved himself, and I know he can do it. I mean, I want to see Henry Cavill be Superman. He was my favorite Superman. Man of Steel was the first film I ever saw with my dad, and it's the only film I've ever seen in theaters with my dad. Because my dad doesn't like going to the movies. So that was an experience that I loved. And when we walked out, I was like, Dad, did you like it? He's like, no, it was too loud. but but you know, so that movie is kind of close to my heart. So I wanted to see Superman come back, but I think DC needs it. I think sometimes if you want something to work, you have to restart. You have to hit the restart button and restart. So, because I don't think DC movie wise, they've done that very good. I think the only DC movie that I could literally rate over an 8 out of 10 would be the Snyder cut of Justice League. And even then, I don't want to sit there for 4 hours, but it was really good. And I really appreciate that film. I thought what he wanted to do and why he couldn't do what he wanted to, that's a heartbreaking story. And I think that he came back and did what he wanted. And I was like, good for you, Snyder. But back to James Gunn. I think it's something that needs to be done. And this is a time to do it because Marvel's getting a lot of backlash. It's getting a lot of hate. And I think if DC can turn around and actually make decent films that don't look fake, I think that DC can come on top if they do it right. Because Marvel is going downhill. Phase 4 hasn't been that great. Well, I mean, She-Hulk exists. That's my argument. Just saying. Like, Marvel has gone downhill. That's why I was talking about, like, things need to end. You need things to end. You cannot continue things. At some point, the anticipation ends. That's why Endgame wasn't that great a film to me, because they just time traveled. They took the easy route. They're like, well, let's just make them do time travel. But before Endgame, you had all this anticipation of all the stones being collected through all these different films and everything. And then you get to Infinity War and you finally meet the GOAT. I'll call him the GOAT. You meet the big guy, Mr. Thanos, and the Avengers lose. And you did not expect that. No one. I remember seeing it in theaters and the whole theater was dead silent. Like, what just happened? Even the actors in the film didn't know what happened. That's crazy. That is so crazy that the actors playing those parts did not know that they were done. But then Endgame came and you expect this big opening and you get disappointed because it's so anticipated. It's so drawn out. So things need to end. They really need to end. But they're not going to. People are going to make money out of it. So it's just not going to end.
Well, it's the same, and I would say this. I'm not critically hard on Endgame like you just were. But I will say this. Infinity War was a better film. And when I walked out of that film, I knew that you weren't going to top that. Like, no matter what they did in Endgame, you just weren't going to top Infinity War. It's the same reason why, and again, bring back to Star Wars, nobody has topped The Empire Strikes Back. Because you don't expect the bad guy to win. And that's a whole different feeling walking out of theater when the bad guy wins.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, and again, I love the original trilogy of Star Wars, but I felt the same way probably that you feel about Endgame, like Return of the Jedi. Like, there was moments that was like, yeah, it's cool and it leads up to this epic fight, but like the Ewok celebration at the end, and it was just I don't know. To me, like, that was a little bit of like the Star Wars. That was like the Jar Jar Binks moment of the original trilogy. To me, it's just like even though I love even though I love Ewok on the PC with Battlefront 2, like they do some cool horror stuff with that. But to me, it's just like the celebration at the end. Just I don't know. The Force Ghost seeing them were cool, and it showed that, you know, of course, Anakin, which wasn't Hayden Christensen at the time back then, it was just whoever played And that's pretty sad that we don't even know probably who played Anakin underneath the mask of
All I
Vader.
know is he's British.
Yeah. So, but that's a good moment. But going back and addressing the DC James Gunn thing, I'm actually I'll use a very sports analogy when it comes to James Gunn and DC with the reboot. Like you said, it's time for things to start anew. It's time for things to end. You can't, and I've been on these situations, and I thought it was going to be one of those years for my Seattle Seahawks. We had gotten rid of Russell Wilson, who had been there for over a decade, led us to Super Bowl, was the core foundation of that franchise. We got rid of Bobby Wagner, the linebacker, who's good. Both of which are probably headed for the Hall of Fame, although Wilson did take a step back this year, which is really bad. But good for your Kansas City Chiefs, may I add. And good for Seattle. We got a better draft pick. But at the end of the day, I was cool with the fact of, hey, we're going to start fresh. We're going to get younger. We're going to build a new core. And yeah, it's sad to lose some people like Henry Cavill. I'm okay with losing Ben Affleck. I had never had an issue with losing Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck is just Ben Affleck in every film he plays.
Pretty much, yeah.
And all said and done, I was cool with James Gunn taking over and doing all that. Now, what's fascinating is he released his new slate where he wants to go in the direction of some characters that we are not very familiar with at DC. And I think that's to James Gunn's benefit that we're getting these new characters that nobody might have heard of, that very slim, unless you pay attention to the comic books, like that they're going to be like right there in the like back corner of the index page of the DC expanded universe. But he's done such a good job with Suicide Squad with new characters. He did a good job with Guardians of the Galaxy with new characters. So I'm excited to see him build his franchise based off really nobodies and make them somebodies. And that's kind of the opposite of Marvel, because right now you had somebodies and are switching over to nobodies in Marvel, and it's not holding. The same magic's not there. It's not happening. So I'm excited for it, but I understood why James Gunn had to come in and get rid of everybody. Yeah, it was sad that Henry Cavill, which I feel more bad about the Witcher situation with Henry Cavill, because whether he left The Witcher or whatever for this role, I don't remember what the exact thing was, but it just sucks he has neither now.
No, yeah. Well, he's a good enough actor. I think you'll hop into something. I will interrupt. The guy who played Darth Vader, his name is David Prowse. Prowse. He's a British guy. I had to say it because we can't just leave a stone unturned. So, all right. Anyway,
you know what? Somehow I think I did know that, because I believe in the behind the scenes, when they talked about David Prowse, he was going to be the voice of Darth Vader too, but his voice was like a higher pitch, and George Lucas is like, no, we can't do this.
Well, he's like British, like British.
Like British. Well, C-3PO is also, Anthony Daniels is British, but Star Wars is really just for the Brits. That's what it is. Just a British fairy tale. It's not even American. But no, I mean, that's, like I said, between Legacy, James Gunn, we jumped really all over the place with this episode, but Chase, it was good catching up with you. We will definitely have you back on here in the future.
Absolutely. I will always come back to talk film.
And he will have his fact checking all ready to go for when I make mistakes. So don't you worry, folks.
That's me. Got my IMDb up.
Well, guys, this is another episode of Donnie Shields' Unedited Podcast here on the Shield of Hope channel. Thank you guys for watching. Check out some more if you can. We're over on Spotify. We're soon going to be on Roku on our channel, so check that out. We got some new news happening. So thank you guys. Have a good one.